Welcome to the Ask Weldon Show, episode 110. So we're 1/10 of the way towards episode 200, and I'm in Berlin this week. I have taken the last 3 or 4 days off because we had a live stream for lolcoaching.com. If you haven't checked that out yet, go there, lol-coaching.com, and make sure that you sign up to either coach or get coached. I'm going to be working with that website with the creator, Josh Hilton. We're kind of co-founding it together again as a business venture. And I still haven't announced what team I'm going to be winning the EU or NA LCS with next split, but that's forthcoming as well. Maybe it'll be out by the time this video is edited and put up. But anyway, let's just dive into the questions. And the first one comes from Resist Impulse. They're over here, so pardon the change of gaze. 100 champ pool per split versus 10 bans. Michael Jordan wasn't available every year. Thoughts? My opinion is that I think that the pick and ban phase is really boring for the audience. I think that Riot would be really smart to get rid of the pick and ban phase or to reduce it as much as possible. And that means keeping it at 3 bans and then 5 picks. And if they go to 10 bans, they do 5 bans, 5 picks. It's just going to get longer. And the time between games and the time that people are allowed to take a break, like the pro athletes are allowed to break between games before they have to get back on stage and start banning again, is going to be really long, it's going to be shorter. And then in the meanwhile, we're going to have more bans, so we're going to want to do more strategizing. And so it's a completely wrong solution to the problem. If you increase the bans, then the teams need more time to plan, but you have less time to plan because pick and ban is going to take longer, and so you want to cram the team back up on stage sooner. And then the audience has to sit there through a bunch of bans, which essentially a ban is a really annoying thing to watch as a spectator, because the only thing that you can possibly see as a spectator when you see a ban is you see somebody that you want to play get taken away. That's it. That's the only joy you get out of it. When you see a pick, you're like, yes, I get to watch this champion. When you see a ban, the only possible outcome is disappointment or neutral. Okay, I didn't want to see the champion anyway, or dang, I wanted to see that one. So it would be in Riot's best interest, as a broadcast at pro level, as the pro player coordination, as the spectator, in every single way to reduce bans and keep it at 0 to 3, in my opinion. 3 being an upper limit, boredom, I would say. So how do you deal with that? How do you keep the complexity creep down without increasing bans? And the answer is you do a drafted pool of champions that can only be played. Now this will turn off a lot of people who would want to watch those champions. Let's say Warwick doesn't make it into the splits, this 12-week window where these champions can be played. Okay, sorry Warwick players, you're gonna have to Warwick one tricks, you're not gonna be able to see that champion played on stage, and that's a bummer. But I think that some sort of global pool of relevant champions, kind of like the free champion rotation, makes a lot of sense for pro play. And I think that essentially what Riot should do is either get all the teams together or probably just decide on their own, because it needs to be global, because they need to be able to balance the game around these champions and put out patches that kind of maybe influence them, and they don't really want to get region specific on their coding. So I think that it needs to be a global thing, and that essentially they should just choose, a number 90. I don't know, 90 most recent reworked champions, or the 90 most played champions in pro play, or the 90 champions that they want to see played in pro play, plus every new champion that comes out. So here we get to keep the adaptability of the pro who needs to learn new champions as they come out. We get to keep the excitement of getting to see the new champion and the marketing aspect of getting to see the new champion on the Rift. We still get a growing champion pool throughout the split as more champions come in, but the core set of champions is reduced in complexity enough that 3 bans is okay. Those are my thoughts on why we should not go to a 5-ban system. All right, the next question is from Xadjobs. I think it's Oddjob XXXX. If we fall behind, my friends tilt pretty hard. What's some stuff I can say or do to change them or get them out of it? This is really dependent on your friend or friends. It's completely contextual to them. Some people need support, some people need encouragement, some people need accountability, some people need to feel respected and loved, some people need to take a break, some people need to hear that they're awesome anyway, some people need to hear that they should buckle down and buck up and go for it, these kind of things. So it really totally depends on how good a read you have on your friends. But here is a tip for you. 90% of the time, I would say, from our friends, what we want is to not be ashamed. Most of the time, when you mess up in front of a friend, shame is the number one factor in a person's tilt or behavior or embarrassment or whatever. And shame is a really hard thing to deal with. It's essentially like your self-worth. And so you need to find a way to erase their shame. And that is a really tough thing because it's an internal metric. And so externally, what you can do are things like, gosh, this is the thing. It's so different with every person, right? You might say, it's okay. I love you anyway. And that might just piss them off and make them feel more ashamed. Or it might erase their shame and make them feel good, depending on contextually like how they're wired up. And I just can't answer that because that's the job that I was doing in teams in spring split of 2015. I was working, one-on-one with players, and we were dealing with those kinds of things. Like when you're forbidden and you have a really good showing at Worlds, and then you don't do so well the next split, and every single game you go in and everybody expects you to do well and you don't. How do you deal with that shame on a personal level and be able to grow with it instead of let it crush you? Because in reality, what I saw from Forbidden when I was watching him play was he was doing like fairly consistently in terms of like his skill set, but his self-evaluation of that was, well, I have these expectations of myself, my fans have these expectations of myself, and I don't match them. I don't match what I want to be, I don't want to match what my fans want to be, and therein lies the difference between like guilt and shame. Guilt is fine. Guilt is like, I did something wrong or I screwed up. Shame is like, I'm a bad person. Therefore, I screwed up or did something wrong. And by the way, I wasn't working with Forbidden. That was just an example that I wanted to give because you could see that he had a really hard year, and it was so hard that he wanted to reboot, right? So he had to go somewhere else and just reboot so that he could get a fresh tactical mindset going on. You're gonna have to figure that out. Try to get them to feel guilty and try to help them ease their shame. That's my bet for you. Good luck. All right, the third question is from JT Morris 96, and they ask, when I'm drilling a specific basic of the game, how do I know when to focus on something else for the next game? This is going to be answered a lot by the new sandbox mode that's coming out. You can drill in there, and then in the game you can try to be holistic and pull it all together. So the answer is actually you need to focus on different things during the game, not even till next game. A lot of times there are things that you cannot no longer accomplish in the game that you're playing, and you need to actually revert or change your focus in the game as it's on the fly in order to get good training out of it. So not only do you need to be good at determining when you need to shift your focus to a new skill set game to game, but you need to be able to, within the game, find ways of reminding yourself or picking yourself up off of a current task and moving to a new one. Now, game to game, how to know when you're ready to focus on something else is essentially, that's a question for a coach, which, by the way, you can get a coach at lol-coaching.com, and they can help you with that. But a lot of times you see, are you moving the needle or not? If you're moving the needle, if you're getting better, you can feel it, you look at your VOD and you think that objectively or subjectively, if you can't really get objective about it, you're actually improving on the task, and that task is related to your main core skill set that you want to improve, then you are doing it right, and you shouldn't just throw that out the window. You should just keep going on that. But if you are struggling and you can see that stuff is not connecting, and this is maybe like either too complex a task or it's just not able to be focused on well, then you need to kind of dial it back, or you need to simplify it, or you need to cut it into pieces, or you need to find some mechanistic way of focusing on something else that allows you to improve that in a more rapid fashion. And that's something that you should be adapting and thinking of every game, but I want to make sure that you're always thinking of it like you're building a Lego castle, not like you're building a new spaceship. I build a lot of Lego spaceships, but not like you're building a new Lego spaceship over there, but that you're like adding on to the one you already have. You don't want to throw all of the babies out with the bathwater. You need to take what you were doing, see what worked about it, what didn't work, cut it into pieces and reassemble them and add a little bit more to layer it up. The biggest problem that I see is people say, well, that's not working, I'll focus on trading. Well, trading's not working, I'll focus on roaming. Well, roaming's not working, I'll focus on summoner skills. They just completely revert their focus instead of saying, okay, well, CSing wasn't working. Let me think about CSing while I'm trying to trade or while I'm doing with the bushes or while I'm dealing with my support. Like layer it up and add the complexity or cut it out or whatever, but focus on trying to move the needle on the task that you're actually doing, if it is related to what you need to do to improve, which a coach can tell you about if you go to. Never mind, I'm not going to do that again. All right, the next question is from Howligan, lol. And they ask, you explain the extremes for breaking a plateau for laners, but what are the extremes for breaking a plateau as a jungler? Very similar. You spam more volume, so you just play way more games, or you play way fewer games and you spend a lot more time preparing. And preparing as a jungler is very similar to preparing as a laner. You watch VODs, you watch your own VOD, and what I would recommend is that you do, with jungling, you have a shortcut, you have a secret way of getting better at the game that nobody else does. Okay, and here's how it works. Prediction and correction is a really good feedback mechanism. I predict this is going to happen, I check if it did, I'm corrected if it didn't. This feedback loop is really powerful for learning, but it's not something that you can do very well with a laner, because let's say you're playing mid and you're like, I predict that he's going to go for this CS, and then you try to go trade him, and then he doesn't, or he dodges it. And then after the game, you're watching the VOD, and you're thinking, what was I predicting then? I don't remember what I was thinking. Was I really thinking? So like Soren Bjergsen on TSM, he will remember that. He'll be like, I predicted that this guy was going to move here, and then he didn't. He stepped 2 inches to the left, and I already stepped 2 inches. And he remembers that. So he has the prediction, check to see if it happened, go back and reassess what your prediction should have been, system going along there. Now with jungling, you can build that into your game. You can clear a camp, and you can say, I predict the enemy jungler is here, therefore I will go here. And then immediately you find out if you're right or not. You find out, oh, he's ganking top, whoops. Or, oh, he's not at double golems, where could he be? Or, oh, so you get to work on prediction and correction. Prediction and then checking and then feedback loop. That feedback loop is there. And then after the game, you can actually compare your path. You can say, okay, I went here to counter gank and he wasn't there. Or I was mirroring him here, but he was on the other side of mid. Or I warned mid that jungler is coming. You can do things like, I think jungler is right here, guys, careful. And then you look after the game and you're pinging there and he's not there. This is really important because if you watch Svenskeren or any of the other top junglers, but mostly Svenskeren because he's the one I've worked with the most, a lot of times he will simply, like his teammates, like Bjergsen will say, where's the jungler, where's Elise? And he'll say, he's right here, and he'll ping a spot on the map. And now he'll have like Svenskeren will have the fog of war, right? He can't see where the jungler is. But I can see where the jungler is because I'm spectating, and he'll ping directly on his body. He literally knows exactly where he's standing. I would say that his error rate on that is less than 10% in all the games that I've watched him. And as the game gets more predictable, like you base it off of knowledge that you can accrue or off of the champion, the pathing, the jungler. So he has an unfair advantage because he's playing against the same junglers over and over and over again, so he gets to know their habits. But in solo queue, you have to kind of know the jungler. You have to know the champion, I guess. The champion is something that you can learn and figure out what is possible with them, what those champions like to do, and then try to get predictive vision. So you can have, okay, he was last seen here, or I have a ward here, therefore he couldn't be there, therefore he did a different path. Try to figure out how it is that you can kind of wrap your noose around the enemy jungler and always know where they are, so you can always predict their movements, so you can always tell your team where to be safe, and so you can always either make the counter play on the other side of the map or the mirrored play with them if your 2v2 or 3v3 happens to be stronger in the skirmish. That is how you can improve as a jungler. If you always know where the opposing jungler is, you can just rank up really fast just with that knowledge. I mean, Reignover beats teams in the LCS consistently by never fighting the opposing jungler at all. He just knows where he is and goes somewhere else and takes all his farm. And the other guy ends up, 40 CS down by 25 minutes. All right, final question is from Skits, and they ask, trying to improve in a short time, less than 6 months, do physical activity, social life, and balance typey things really matter? If you're trying to improve in a short time, less than 6 months, no, they don't really matter. The only thing that matters is getting better at League of Legends. But I would also argue that getting better in 6 months doesn't really matter. I would argue that Okay, so those things are correlated very weakly with direct improvement over 6 months. If you want direct improvement over 6 months as measurable as possible, you should spend all of your time training and getting coached. The things that matter most are your coach, the amount of time you spend training, and the amount of focus you have when you're training. Actually, reverse those. The amount of focus you have when you're training and the amount of time you have when you're training. The amount of time you have for training. So those are the things that matter, that correlate in. But what does it matter if you get better after 6 months? You might think that it's the end of the world if you don't improve after 6 months because I don't know how old you are or what your context is, but I'm guessing that you have a conflated view of what's really important for life and development. Because my argument would be physical activity, social life, and balance will help you improve far more in the long term than any sort of short-term growth you might have in terms of ranking. And the reason that I know that is because what I see is a lot of people who want to go pro planning for the short term. They're thinking, oh my God, this looks so fun. I want to be a pro esport player. I got to get masters in the next 3 months. Not realizing that A, they can get masters and then get pro and then suck. Like, for example, Dardoch blew his whole first year of being pro on being immature. Or you can be like Biofrost, who made sure that he had his life squared away while he was going pro, and then he got to be recruited by a top team, and he came in fully prepared to perform at his best and rocked in the first season. So you don't want to be one of those crappy rookies who just shoots to the top as fast as they can and then has a while in the pro world before they get their act together. But more importantly, this might not be your game. You might end up going pro in 5 years in a completely different game. And the only reason that's going to happen is because you reverse engineered your learning process. You reverse engineered how it is that you improve at the game. You put the time in to build a training system that works for you, for life, for anything, not just for League of Legends. So that you know what it is to do to learn a foreign language. You know what it is you have to do to learn a new game to get to a high level. A lot of the first pros in League of Legends, like Reginald and Hotshot, were high-ranked players in previous games. Okay? And they segued that into the next game that they played because they knew how to play MOBAs or video games at a high level, and they were able to transition that. So you have to ask yourself, when are you going to die? When are you going to retire? And the answer is probably, hopefully, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years in the future. So why in the world are you planning for 6 months from now and hanging your entire life's progress on that short time window, when really you should be planning for the long term, looking at the trend, which is showing that esport athletes are going to be older and older and older, and they're going to have longer and longer and longer careers as the money gets more and more and more, and the incentive to stay in esport instead of going to a streaming or an entertainment career improves. And then late 20s, men and women are going to start winning out a lot more over the early teens that try to break in because they have the full-fledged executive functioning necessary to maintain the kind of drive and focus and motivation that is necessary to compete at the world level. And then you're going to be kind of left in the dust because you spent 6 months abandoning everything that's actually important for building a robust infrastructure, like having the right social support network, having the right kind of physical fitness and body that can withstand years of intense training, and having a balance now that forces you to take the time you spend training more seriously. Because if you spend all your time training, you're not going to treat it seriously. I never improved as much as when I limited myself to 2 games a day. I did an experiment. I did some sports psychology on myself, and I said, I want to see, while I have this baby that's being born, I want to see if I can improve, if I can climb to diamond on 2 games a night. And I'd been silver and gold bouncing around in there for years, for 3 years. And I did it. Over the course of 4 months, I played 2 games a day and I climbed to diamond on them. Okay, because I put intense focus on that. So when you stretch out the amount of time you play and you cut everything else out of your life, you squander a lot of the focus that you could bring to that time. And when you constrict it and you say, I have this obligation, and I have these 2 hours, these 4 hours to get really good at League, then you take it. Your brain is not confused. It's not confused at all that this is really important to you and that you're going to really learn from all the silly mistakes that you make during those 4 hours, and you are never going to make them again. Whereas when you have a whole day to play, you make a silly mistake, you're like, well, maybe by the end of the day I won't be making this silly mistake. Hopefully, cross my fingers. So I promise that while the answer is that in the short term, at the pro level, I focused a lot on what moved the needle for the next 6 months while trying to maintain enough of the rest for long-term growth for my athletes. But you, if you're not yet pro, should not be confused that this is a long con, this is a long game, and that you want to develop holistically in order to be at the top of performance in the world. And I mean develop holistically. I don't mean develop like well-roundedly. I don't mean you should be, a video editor and good at math and good at English, and you should learn languages and you should study this and study that and play lots of games. I mean that you should all in on the sport that you want to train, but you should do it by incorporating all aspects of your life into it. So it's not that you have to go and become good at everything. It's that you should get good at one thing, but in order to get good at one thing, you should maximize and optimize everything else that you do. So I got to pass math class so that I can stay in school, so that I can get better at leagues, so that I can continue that trajectory. So therefore, what is the best way for me to optimize my math homework? How can I quickly learn this? How can I swiftly get it done? Make sure that I pass the test so that I have more time and more energy to focus on this. So your optimization of that system improves your optimization of the other one. Do you see how that ties back and forth? Okay, this has already been a long enough answer, but it's something that I'm really passionate about, because what people don't realize is that they can take their macro skills or their micro skills of how it is that they improved in their math homework in order to pass the test so that they could get it done with, so that they could focus on this. They can take the microscopic skills they learned there and they can apply it to in the same way with the same kind of system to the other skill that they're learning, League of Legends. So I'm just really passionate about that because it's always been true in all fields of expert performance. And I think that you should be focusing on understanding what's going to move the needle now, which is getting a coach, but also not abandoning the long-term planning, which is actually going to make you good enough to be a pro or to be a high rank 5 years down the road, 2 years down the road, 10 years down the road, so that you're doing what you want then and not just trying to aim like a comet for the 6 months from now and then falling off into a gravity well and burning up in the sun. All right, that's the show for today. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out Weldon's list. I'm starting to put more and more effort onto this. This is kind of like my favorite thing that I like to tinker with at night. So down below this video, you'll find a link to Weldon's list, and it's essentially a set of emails that I am writing and that consist of like my best of. So the best videos that I've made, there's a training course in there from 2 years ago that I really, really like and that I kind of like encapsulated within there. There's reviews of books that I've read so that you don't actually have to read them. You can buy it and read it. I recommend my favorite 3 books right now, but I also write a comprehensive little review that pulls out all the most important information so that you just have that without needing to read the book. I have the best blog posts from my blog, which has been running since 2012. Some of them are my posts, some of them are guest posts that I've reworked and made into like an email format. You can get them on your phone, you can read them on the bus, in class, when you're bored with the movie that your significant other is forcing you to watch, whether it's an action movie and you're like, I want the lovey-dovey stuff, or whether it's a lovey-dovey movie, you're like, where's the action stuff? You can be learning, you can be reading, you can be entertaining yourself, you can be improving by reading my list. Right now, it's just like half a month, so just 18 days-ish of content. I might spread that out so I don't overwhelm you. Maybe you'll get one every 2 days starting next week instead of every 1 day. But make sure that if you haven't signed up for that you sign up for that right now. Go! Okay, the second thing I want you to check out is the MAC program, mindgames.gg/MAC. A lot of the questions that I get asked on the show, and some of them that I skip because there's other questions to get to, can be answered by that program. That program is my training program that simplifies and exemplifies a lot of the techniques that are really essential and core towards this kind of like full focus that you need to drive towards training an esport, or passing a math class, or becoming really good at lacrosse, or whatever it is that you're aspiring to. For me, it's business and performance coaching. So that's what and being a father. So that's what I apply these skills to. They're universal transferable skills that I essentially trained in myself while I was pursuing a craft to the world-class level, or trying to, and that you can do the same thing. So that's what I mean when I say you take the small minutia of optimization and you apply it to get better at everything in your life. When you focus on something so completely that you go out of your way to learn all sorts of different ways to get better at it, like for example taking this Mac program, which is a really good way to invest in yourself, and you apply those skills to that specific thing and you become really good at it, you learn how those skills apply to everything else in your life that you're trying to improve, and you can transfer them around. So that's why I recommend the Mac program, mindgames.gg/MAC. And the third thing I recommend, if you're just looking for something really quick today that can just start, as I said, moving the needle on your life, whatever it is, whatever the task you're looking to do, the thing that had the biggest impact on me with the least amount of time invested was the 5-minute journal. I've used it with every team that I've coached. You can buy it. It's a product. I linked it down below to the manufacturer. If you use my link, they throw me a bonus, like, thanks for selling one of our journals kind of tip, so you can pay for my Coke today. I don't drink Coke, sorry. You can pay for my energy drink, tea or coffee. I only drink tea or coffee, mostly. Actually, there's a new energy drink coming out that I might try, but I'll tell you about that later. Anyway, or you don't even have to buy it. I didn't even buy it for myself. Like, I bought gifts for friends, but when I needed it myself, essentially I just did it in Google Drive. They have a little PDF on their website that you can kind of see what the questions are, and the science behind them is pretty straightforward. It's hard to screw up. And actually, in one of my emails on Weldon's List, I explain how to do this the correct way for self-improvement, so that you know all the science behind it, you know how you should be thinking about it when you do it, how you should be constructing the sentences when you write it. But it's just a 5-minute journal. The title fits, it takes 5 minutes to do in the morning, and then your whole day is more productive and more prioritized than it had been if you hadn't done this 5-minute journal. And I did it for a number of months, for maybe 6 months. It was phenomenal. I went from essentially just having a website to coaching pro teams and then coaching TSM. Okay, so if you want to go from just having a blog to having a content channel and coaching pro teams, that's how I did it. Was every single day narrowing down the key tasks that I needed to do that day and getting them done, while also having a job and having children. It's powerful stuff. Check it out.